on the screen. Okay, okay. And could you write back?
Okay, got it.
Okay. All right. So some people are coming a little later who I thought, based on my list, were going to start. So it's a little rearranged, but let me see if I can do this. Share screen.
My computer's heating up. I've something here.
Oh, hey, Renee. Renee, could you help me with this? I did something that's taken me off.
I don't know what did you do? You were screen sharing.
Yeah.
You want to screen share?
No, I want to get the,
Stop share.
yeah. So now, wait a minute. Now I do share screen. And which one? Oh, this one.
That's
This one.
it? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, this.
Okay, wait a minute. It should be there.
Okay.
Do you see it? Can you see can you see what Simon is sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Okay.
I just see a screen that, oh, okay, got it. Got it.
Okay. So I think that the first person who should be going is not here now, unless he is. Sean, are you here now? Okay. So he's not here.
I think
And
this is
so
very funny.
we're going to start with this one, which is Lucia. Lucia.
Yes, I'm here.
I did see you. So I hope you're okay with being the first one.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I was familiar with Soutine, but just tangentially, I never really I didn't visit the Barnes collection and knew absolutely nothing about his life, which I found quite interesting. So I incorporated that in my little essay here.
Sure.
Haim Soutine, born in 1893 in the town of Smilavici in what is now Belarus, left no journals, did not title or even sign many of his works, and left almost no correspondence. Much of his life's history is based on guesswork and a few anecdotal stories. His art, though, speaks volumes. Mainly focused on still life carcasses, landscapes, and portraits, his work is the epitome of expressionist art. Compared to the folkloric, magical scenes and the joie de vivre in Marc Chagall's work, Soutine's world is heavy in bleak imagery, reminiscent of an elegiac lament marred by dissonant tones. His work has a magnetic quality that simultaneously seduces and repels. Soutine's lavish portfolio of carcass paintings denotes a struggle with life and death, a tortured response to food, dating back to his childhood, and a fascination with lifeless beings. Hair with Forks, painted in 1924, exhibits a once lively animal now flaccid in death, while the forks rein in the hair with an anthropomorphic quality, as if alive and enjoying the bounty or the death of the animal. Soutine's most famous carcass painting, Carcass of Beef, which is not on the screen, is a take on a 1655 Rembrandt work, Flayed Ox. Soutine painted from life. Therefore, he kept carcasses in his studio, and the stench of death brought about complaints from his neighbors. The rotting flesh. He had fresh blood poured on the carcass as he was painting it to enhance the color, making it look as if it was freshly slaughtered. His gallery dealer said that Soutine, prior to working on a carcass painting, would fast to the point of starvation.
Amazing, amazing.
It's noteworthy to mention that Soutine died of a perforated ulcer. In 1913, Soutine left his native town and moved to Paris, where he studied at l'École des Beaux-Arts. Residing in Montparnasse, he became friends with Amedeo Modigliani. In 1918, Soutine and Modigliani traveled to the south of France, to the much heralded Provence. The paintings he created during his 3-year stay, many of them landscapes, were exhibited in Paris in 1922. Philadelphia collector Albert Barnes purchased the entire exhibit, bringing much deserved recognition to Soutine's work. Soutine's landscapes are not quiet, discreet, or traditional. They depict in bold colors a world painfully vibrant, with contorted movement, as if the beauty of the landscape was marred by the background of the bloody events of World War I. He would start each painting with about 40 brushes and discard each brush after a few strokes. He smeared paint with his fingers and hands, brutally applying strokes of vivid color. In the landscape painting in the middle, Streets of Cannes, 1923, the road appears as a lumpy, gnarled tree trunk, with the village houses growing out of it as excrescences, while the entire tree bends in the wind of time and memory, surrounded by sky and sea. Expressionism indeed. Born in the Pale of Settlement, Soutine was raised during a time when Jewish tradition considered figurative imagery taboo. He was often ostracized and beaten by his family and within the community due to the prevailing dictum at the time that Jews must not paint. Maternity, 1942, is evidently a portrait of a mother and child. It has an atavistic quality that harks back to the Madonna and Child of the Christian Pietà, as a child looks dead. There's almost a palpable link to Soutine's tortured carcass paintings, his theme of life and death. Soutine was able to overcome the absence of pictorial history in his native Jewish tradition. He embodies the early 20th century artist, completely immersed in the torment of his innermost soul, nakedly and unabashedly revealed through his revolutionary expressionist art. A somewhat unheralded genius that inspired many of the best-known 20th century artists.
That is really well written. Really, that's, I think, your best piece of writing. Really extremely well written.
I worked on it.
No, it really shows, and it shows your involvement too. It's not just copying random thoughts, but you're very involved. Compliments, really.
I found his work very moving.
Yeah.
The more you look at the paintings, the more in depth you can see something in them. So it's really fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing the Barnes collection.
I totally agree. Have you been there before?
No,
you
I haven't.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of it.
If you're going, I would say think of spending more than a day there.
Oh, okay.
Because it's really endless. He just would up everything, and it's of a particular time and expression, and really it's actually tiring going through there. It's very intense. I could say more about it, but let other people participate. So the next one I have is Len, which is this.
So
Am I
these are two, yes, these are two works by Chaim Soutine. They are both oil on canvas. On the left, we have Man in a Green Coat, 1921. It's approximately 3 feet by 2 feet. And on the right, we have The Red Stairs at Cannes from 1918. It's approximately 5 feet by 4 feet. In both Man in a Green Coat and The Red Stairs at Cannes, we see the departure from convention and permissions that were hard-earned by Soutine's predecessors and contemporaries. These pieces are figurative, a male portrait and a stairway on a street, but in homage to Van Gogh, whose popularity had exploded in the 2 decades prior, they transform the everyday into something otherworldly and unknowable. These pieces are of commonplace subjects, but in homage to Soutine's mentor and friend Modigliani, they break the shackles of the ordinary, following the curved contours of the artist's mind's eye. These pieces are of drab subjects. No doubt the man's suit was an unremarkable green, and the street was weathered and worn. But in homage to Soutine's contemporary and friend Marc Chagall, these canvases exalt their subjects in a majesty of color, giving flight to form. These subjects lack inherent emotional power, but in homage to Edvard Munch's dark landscapes, Soutine uses surreal, warped blankets of shape and color to communicate how anguish or ennui, fear or exultation can ooze from the pores of a person, landscape, or carcass of beef. What an extraordinary mind Soutine must have had to mentally integrate and express on canvas the transformative power of Van Gogh, the warped figurative ideal of Modigliani, the bold colors of Chagall, and the emotional mindscapes of Munch. But most extraordinary is that while Soutine clearly borrows from these masters, his voice is powerfully non-derivative, authentically his own. He is an arsonist. These volcanic works explode inward and outward with a clarion fire that shrugs off derivation and owns the canvas with a power that seizes your wrist like the bony hand of an old crone. Surely Soutine recognized that his predecessors and contemporaries who broke convention had given him permission to break those same conventions. But very few artists succeed as Soutine has here in transcending the permissions earned by others to command an exhilarating realm of absolute, unbridled creative freedom.
Yeah, beautiful, really beautiful. One thing that I think of is this crazy aside here, is that one thing I think of when I listen to what you're saying is that one of the things I love about art is that you never know as an artist what it is kind of that you're doing. And does someone have something on that I keep hearing echoes? Could someone turn that off? Hello? All right, thanks. So if I could just be clear about this, he looks like the most unlikely successful artist. Okay. And he's very daring and he is super successful. It's just that it doesn't appear that way in his lifetime. And I really like that about art. So if you wanted to amplify that, you could speak about Van Gogh, who either sold no paintings in his life or one, but is, an incredible success story in terms of being ahead of his time, as this man was. Anyway, that's just an aside. So the next one I have is Alan, which is this one.
Right. So on the left is Amedeo Modigliani's, I'm going to pronounce this right, Jean Ebertern,
Yes, yes.
which was painted in 1919. The dimensions are 29 inches by 36 inches. And on the right is Soutine's The Bride, which was painted circa 1924. And I could not find the size of that. So Modigliani's Jean's light skin and white blouse project from the canvas and contrast well against the scrumbled wall intersection behind her. The curvilinear lines and forms and the colors work together to create an interesting composition. All of the forms, including the woman, are very abstract. The scrumbled orange element that she leans on is most likely the chair that she's sitting on, but we're not sure. The forms working together and complementing each other are the reasons why this work is so striking. Her low neckline and exposed breastbones and the placement of her hands elicit a very sensual intent by the artist. Her face leans to the left, juxtaposed to her body. She's delicate. Her eyes are alive and staring out. There are no pupils, which adds an air of mystery and which causes the viewer to feel a bit uneasy. The scene is very quiet, with a pensive mournfulness or sadness. It seems obvious that Modigliani was greatly infatuated by this woman. It does turn out that he was madly in love with her, and they had a daughter together. Unfortunately, there was a very sad ending to their story. Modigliani died, it's said, due to drug and alcohol abuse in January of 1920, not long after this work was finished. His death was followed by Jean's suicide 2 days later while pregnant with a second child. Soutine's painting is quite the opposite. This painting is loud and full of movement. The strokes of the paint, which makes up the young woman's wedding gown, exudes movement as it appears to be melting. Her face is elongated in the horizontal as opposed to Modigliani's Jean, which elongates in the vertical. The tiara of flowers reinforces the elongation. Her cheeks are flushed. She is not calm. She seems anxious, maybe because she's very young and perhaps happily being forced into a marriage. The bride's form takes up almost all of the canvas with just enough highly decorative background to give us a sense of space. Her hands are clasped below her sash. She appears to be holding her middle. Perhaps she's pregnant. This painting also leaves us uneasy. Both paintings have quite unique styles. Modigliani's is calm and quiet, and Soutine's is loud and noisy. Therefore, they may affect the viewer in very different ways. However, it is the reason that they do affect us in some way that we understand that they have imported something from the ether. It's this importation that defines these works as fine art.
Very good descriptions of both of them. And I can't help wanting to ask you what you thought of my suggestion of last week.
Which was to
maybe keep some kind of journal or diary of the things you see.
Well, yeah, and I actually do that. I actually, I make large prints of all of the works that I write about, and I do have all of these, all of these essays.
Terrific.
But I will do that for other things as well, if that's what you're
So you didn't need me to suggest that.
Well, I never
In
thought
other
of
words,
doing
you had it
like
down before.
I never thought of doing anything like this, except, that in your class, and it's actually opened up a lot of, it's making me think differently about paintings, in fact.
No, that's great. That's great. I really suggested it in the best possible spirit. I just felt that sometimes when I write about things, it really clicks in my head as to what I'm thinking. And it's fun. It's like even if it doesn't have good grammar, it's sort of fun. You're coming to terms with something.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does make you look at things in the painting that you may not think of doing when you look at it in a museum or a gallery.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the next one I have is Victoria. Oh no, the other way. Oh no, this isn't
No,
Victoria.
that's not me.
This is Lucy. Is Lucy there?
I am, but my
Oh,
head
okay.
isn't. I don't
Could
know
you-
why, but
Could you speak about these two?
yeah.
Okay.
My chosen paintings are Modigliani portraits of women, which represent his earliest years, 1907, and near the end of his short life, 1919 in Paris. The first is of Maud Abrantes, who was one of his early lady friends. At this time, he was particularly interested in the works of Toulouse-Lautrec and Cézanne, and the painting shows some of the influence. This painting is in the collection of the Hecht Museum at the University of Haifa. Black color defines the woman in the picture, particularly the shadows under her eyes. White patches enhance her face shape and her hair. He gives her a long neck, but nothing as extreme as most of the other women he painted later on. The blue-gray-white scumbled background is invaded by the colors of her rusty green, again scumbled, colored coat and perhaps hood.
Well done. Excellent.
No distortion of her face is apparent here. The painting seems to depict night. This is of interest because most of his later portraits are clearly in the studio. Interesting how realistic she is. You feel like you've seen this woman walking down the street. Also consider the width of the canvas as opposed to the next portrait. It makes it possible to include more detail. It also appears to be hastily executed. I've chosen number 30, Jeanne Hébuterne, because it allows you to see some of her personality, even if in a somewhat distorted characterization, which you can't say of most of his other portraits of women. One wonders if the distortion and the anonymity, which became a way of using paint variously in a fairly repetitive design, even with the nudes, expressed his true feelings about women. His portraits of men, friends, and acquaintances are not repetitive, even with expressionistic means of presenting them. The personality of each man comes through. So Jeanne Hébuterne was around 19 when this portrait was painted in 1919. She was his last muse, the mother of their daughter. And I guess somebody else already mentioned how tragic the whole thing with his Modigliani's death and her suicide. This canvas is narrow, which emphasizes the slenderness of the subject. Jeanne looks directly at you. There's a real person here, as in the Abrantes painting. The colors for both portraits are limited, but particularly so here. You can't tell what the scumbled background is. Colors gray blue, and orange brown, which emphasize her red-brown hair. You can't miss the intensity of her gaze, set within pale skin, long nose, small mouth. There is a photo of her which suggests a different looking young woman, although no doubt she had her share of intensity. Modigliani was not into making portraits from photos. He was looking at the real model in front of him. But African-influenced faces, paint density, and his special love of that orange-red gold hue with a very small red mouth affected all of his portrait renditions.
Very nice. Very good. Lucy, really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the next one I see is
That's me.
this is Victoria, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's, it's funny. I did write something, but before I start reading it, I just wanted to say how different my impression is so far of these paintings from other people's. So anyway, so I'm just going to read what I wrote. So many portraits. I found one website that had 349 paintings, most of them portraits. They are also clearly Modigliani's work, the long faces, spare details, eyes without pupils, like classical statues. But the subjects would all be recognizable if you met them, their individuality shining through the paint. He was 36, such a young man when he died from tuberculosis that he got when he was 16. So that's different than what other people have been saying. Anyway, 20 years he was sick, and yet he created all of these luscious, luminous paintings. The first painting I chose is Portrait of a Young Woman, dated around 1915. I wasn't able to find the size for this painting. Who is she? She is fearless the way she's watching the painter, so self-possessed. Is she angry? Is she just curious about what he'll come up with? Did she challenge him to paint her? I love the details of her earring and her mouth with the slightly crooked teeth. Modigliani painted the teeth in quite a few of his portraits. Have other artists painted teeth? Other than these two details, the shapes in this portrait are so simple and abstract. The second painting is, I can't pronounce this name, Lunia Czechowska, with her left hand on her cheek, 1918, approximately 22 by 18 inches. Her eyes, or lack of eyes, immediately draw the viewer's attention. They are so blue, as they are in many of his eyeless portraits. Is that an idealization, or is it a representation of empty space as in an empty sky? In any case, it creates a barrier between the viewer and the subject. Does it represent a distance Modigliani feels from others, from the world, possibly as a result of his lifelong illnesses? But what really anchors this image is the model's hand with her two rings. It is so unusual because the hands in most of Modigliani's paintings are not important, if they are included at all. They are modestly folded on the model's knees and laps, and they are not well defined. In contrast, the hand in this portrait almost has a life of its own, a spider-like presence. And the rings, slightly loose on her finger, are such a specific, austere detail, making the viewer look around the rest of the painting to see if there's anything else of a decorative nature. No, there isn't, only those two rings. And that's what I wrote.
Oh, that's very good. Very descriptive, very well seen. Really hard looking. Very, very good. Very good. So the next one I have is Ron, who is not here. And he sent me his piece. So I'm going to read it for him. So this is Ron. Portraits of people, portraits of buildings, portraits of places. When Mr. Barnes paid Soutine off for the catch of 60 paintings he acquired during his studio visit, it is reported Soutine grabbed the money, ran down to the street, hailed a passing taxi, and demanded to be taken immediately to the Riviera, 400 miles away. I imagine he arrived in this place, Cannes-sur-Mar. Someone has something on, some radio program or something. Could you turn it off? Thank you, thank you. Thanks.
I wonder if it's some kind of feedback.
Yeah, well, just keep it off then, okay? The town in late day sun with glowing, warm sandstone buildings is depicted perched at a giddy height above a valley to the left. The painting suggests a bacchanalian mood, taking its cue from the like figure splayed out in the street. At the end of his outstretched left arm is what may be a garden gate, but can also be seen as a bottle of spirits. The upright lines of the buildings are woozy and vertiginous, sharing in the intoxication. The flush of the foreground scene is balanced by the cool cerulean blue of the darkening maritime range, bejeweled by the lights of other villages in the distance. Kakashka's late day view of Prague, a city I know well from a 9-month stay in 1966-67. I can't understand what the sound is coming from. Could you mute that? If it's yours, could you mute that, please?
Everyone should mute.
It sounds like a radio in the background.
Maybe everyone should mute.
Sounds like feedback somewhere.
Yeah.
Could everyone mute?
Okay.
Oh, that's much better. Kakashka's late day view of Prague, a city I know well from a 9-month stay in 1966-67, and many visits, is also a kind of celebratory moment, here of the golden Prague, the city itself. The painting, with the late day sun sinking into the southwest, is reported to have been painted in the late autumn of 1934, late enough in the year for burning of the abundant soft coal. The smoky haze fosters a shift toward the red. Here, as with Soutine, there is a dialogue between warm and cool tones. The upper left of the ample canvas shows bluish rain clouds above the Moldo, Charles Bridge, and the new town of the 15th century. While the overall impression is that of free abstraction, in Kakashka's numerous cityscapes, there is flawless precision. A photograph from the same vantage point would validate the accurate depiction by every dab of paint of a man-made structure. So I would just say here that it's very nice for Ron to have let me read this, and it helped him to write it, to know that someone was reading it. And if that's the case later on in the term, I'd be glad to read what you write, and I think that's very nice. I think it's fine. So so the next one that I have is
That's
Kathy.
okay.
Am I correct?
Yes, that's mine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
And it's nice to see you. I think you had trouble getting on.
I did. I don't know what happened, but okay. The dates of these self-portraits, Modigliani on the left is 1919. The size is 39 inches by 25. Soutine on the right is 1918, 21 and a half inches by 18. A self-portrait is many times painted as a study to analyze the forms of the human face with the varying flesh tones, facial anatomy, and the pose. However, Modigliani and Soutine's self-portraits are more about portraying their inner souls rather than painting more traditional self-portrait studies. Though both artists had classical training, they each developed a very personal vision and painting technique. Soutine's influences were Rembrandt, Chardin, and Courbet, but he became more concerned with color, shape, and texture rather than pictorial representation. In his self-portrait, Soutine stares blankly into the mirror with a frontal pose cropped just below the shoulders. He uses strong primary colors, attacking the canvas with short, vigorous strokes. The surface was layered with thick impasto paint, giving the canvas a sculptural quality. Soutine's choice of a strong yellow as a background color was, perhaps, an attempt to convey a feeling of cheerfulness as opposed to the depression that plagued him most of his life. Modigliani, like Soutine, had academic training, yet his work, focusing on portraiture and the figure, became highly stylized with elongated faces, blank eyes, and intense brushwork. He was influenced by African art as well as Cézanne and Toulouse-Lautrec. Yet his work was unique in a category of its own. In this self-portrait, painted the year before his untimely death, it portrays the figure of Modigliani with an elongated face, which, though his style, could also have been a result of the severe tuberculosis that was taking hold of his body. With the pale skin tone, gaunt face, and seated pose, it shows the precarious condition of his health. Painting one's self-portrait is a rigorous endeavor. In painting his self-portrait, Modigliani, given the state of his poor health, must have accomplished this task by sheer force of his will. And that's it.
Excellent, excellent. Kathy, I'm curious to know how well you knew these two artists.
I didn't, but I did research.
But you didn't know either one of them.
Oh, I did. I knew, I knew of them, but I didn't know their work well. You know, Modigliani probably more than Soutine, but I didn't know the background, their backstory. So I researched them.
That's good. That's good. What do you make of Soutine?
Oh, I really like it. I mean, I love the brushwork, you know, the curved lines. Like he's very Van Gogh.
Very Van Gogh. Very
I like
Van...
in his work.
Yeah, good. I like that. I like that expression. Very Van Gogh. Is Sean there now? Okay, we'll come back to him. So the next one that I have is Sue. No, I don't have her either. Let's see. Okay, this is Sue, who couldn't be here tonight. So I hope I do her justice in reading this. So this is nude looking over her right shoulder, 2 by 4 feet, 1917. She says this painting was sold at auction at Sotheby's in 2018 for 157.2 million, the highest price ever placed on an artwork headed to auction up until that time. Then she juxtaposes this with Female Nude Eve, 1933, Chaim Soutine, oil on canvas, 18 by 10 inches, Colon collection, COLIN collection, New York. So this is Sue.
Excuse me, I can't see the second picture. I only see the first one. Does anybody else have that?
I can't really help you with that.
Just-
I could send that
just-
to you.
You can use your pointer to move it to the left and see if that works. Oh, there it is. Okay, I thought it
Oh,
was.
great, great. Thank you,
Okay.
thank you. I can just barely do any of this. So you're asking me a question that is just about impossible. Um, so this is Sue. Modigliani painted many nudes. For Soutine, this was his only one. The two paintings reveal not only differences in the approach of the two men to the application of paint, but perhaps offer some insight into what drives them as artists. Modigliani's nude looks directly at us over her shoulder, confidently, self-possessed, perhaps a bit contemptuously. Her eyes appear to be judging us as we look at her. She seems well cared for. Her hair is styled, her cheeks have a healthy flush. One feels Modigliani's comfort in painting her and his relishing painting the sensuousness of her body. The painter seems in great control of his process and at ease in the presence of the woman he is painting. She is seductive and languid, almost idealized. What is most immediate is the brilliance and warmth of the orange of her body, which seems to give off heat, aided by the yellow that emerges from underneath. This is a very interesting statement, aided by the yellow that emerges from underneath. The nuanced application of the painting of her body creates an almost silken feel to her skin. Also striking about this image is the way the canvas is divided into three horizontals of distinct color. The brilliant orange of her body is in sharp contrast to the solemn, somewhat muddy purple and magenta of the wall behind her, which covers the upper half of the painting, and the rumpled white sheet beneath, which reflects the yellow from her body and the purple and magenta from the walls. The fluidity of the long lines and curves of her body are juxtaposed against the straight horizontal and vertical lines on the wall. The painting is visually stunning. Contrast this with Soutine. Why is this the one and only nude he has painted? And whereas Modigliani's titles are all anonymous and generic, seated nude, reclining nude, etc., Soutine's is Female Nude Eve, 1933. There is the impression that Modigliani takes sensual pleasure in the female form and even idealizes it. But with Soutine's nude, there seems to be an affection for this particular woman, or is it a young girl? Even though he doesn't make her body particularly attractive, he slashes on the paint, creating an all too real body, not perfectly lithe, but a bit lumpy with sagging breasts. And rather than have the inviting warmth of the orange with undertones of yellow, Soutine reverses this with the yellow on top and the orange peeking through, creating an almost sickly tone. This is a very nice piece of writing. There is much color in the painting, although the colors don't have the brilliance of Modigliani's. Though the slashes of paint strokes on our body, through the slashes of paint strokes on our body, we see green, orange, brown, and white emerging through the yellow. The wall, though muddy, also reveals orange and green through the brown. While the paint is applied more heavily and physically than Modigliani, there is nonetheless care taken for the paint to reveal an inner life to this young woman. Despite the lack of inviting sensuousness, there is something very tactile in how Soutine has painted Eve. The red coarsened hands and the specificity of the nipples on her breasts. But more importantly for this nude is her face. We are drawn almost more to her face than her body. There is something childlike and shy as she looks away from us. Her lips are full, her nose defined, and her eyes wide and sensitive, whereas the carefully applied makeup, whereas the blush on the face of Modigliani's nude seems either to be evidence of health or carefully applied makeup, Eve's rosy face appears ruddy. She doesn't give the impression of being as well cared for as the woman in the Modigliani. She looks uncomfortable. Her hands cover her genital areas. We get a sense of Soutine's clumsy tenderness for this young woman. His interest is not so much in the painting of the female form as in painting the vulnerability and awkwardness of this young woman for whom he appears to have affection. The affection is exhibited by not idealizing her, but presenting her in her raw truth. And perhaps through her awkwardness, he has communicated his own. Unfortunately, Sue isn't here, but it strikes me that it's a very observant piece of writing with her own overview of her observations. They're really excellent. So now the next one I believe I have is Peter. Am I correct, Peter? Is this right? Peter? We're going to just go on.
Yes, that's right. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I
Okay,
had
good,
you
good,
on. Sorry
good.
about that. Sorry
Good.
about that.
Okay, your turn.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. I chose these two images for comparison primarily because of the similarity of the emotions expressed by the subjects in each painting. They both seem sad and anxious. Having looked at samples from each artist last week, the difference between how each artist expresses themselves in painting holds true here. Unlike Soutine, Modigliani uses large, simple forms in color which harmonize with each other and play off the surface of the canvas. The way he uses curved lines to define most of the forms lend a lyrical and sensual quality to the whole picture. Anxiety and sadness are the story, though, in this painting, and he's still using form to capture it. In this painting, he's utilizing large forms and small forms together to deliver the message. Why are the fingers in the subject's right hand separated in the way they are? It seems like his mind is on something else, something unsettling. His body and head, leaning to his right, lend a kind of sadness to his posture. This is strengthened by the muddy green square of a window or a wall, can't really tell what that is, behind him, contrasting the generally warm tones of the painting. If eyes are windows to the soul, then the way Modigliani paints the pupils here as ellipses drifting into the eyelids make it impossible for the viewer to feel anything other than that this man is sad. I guess we could just really say he's tired, but the thin black line at the top of his upper right lip gives his mouth a slight Tucker Carlson pursed lips feeling. He's annoyed about something. With Soutine, it's all about the paint and the paint and the paint. The wholeness of the image seems to instinctively emerge from the driving need to just paint and let whatever he is narrating almost entirely intuitively emerge from the madness of the strokes. The sense of sorrow and despair here comes mostly from the dark, muddy color that envelop the portrait. He uses the contrast of the bright red-greenish face against the muddy background to add a sense of urgency to the sadness that this guy is feeling. There are also subtle shades of blue in the top background muddiness and a muddy red, the swooping shape that frames the bottom, and a muddy red the swooping shape that frames the body the bottom of the portrait. Modigliani here uses mostly warm colors to set the stage to depict a man who is irked by something. Soutine uses contrast to be the stage of a man caught in something he is really sad and almost traumatized by. In Soutine's paintings, the figure is leaning slightly forward and to his left, while Modigliani's subject is leaning back and to the right. Maybe that is why, although both men feel sad and unsettled about something, the figure in Soutine's portrait comes across as more dangerously troubled. And that's it.
Yeah, well, that's terrific. Really well done, Peter.
Thank you.
Excellent, really excellent.
Well, they're beautiful paintings. Really.
Yeah, yeah. No, you really nailed it, I think. So the
Thank you.
next group I have is this one, which is Carol.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. Okay. These are two portraits of the same person. The one on the left, oh, no, they're reversed. The one on the right is a self-portrait by Soutine done in 1916. The work is 26 inches by 12 inches and is in the Hermitage. The second, the one on the left, is a portrait of Soutine by Modigliani. It was done in 1915 and is 14 by 11 inches and is in the Staatsgalerie in Stuttgart. Both artists are expressionists, yet the portraits seem strikingly dissimilar. Soutine's is hot and Modigliani's is cool. Soutine's loosely painted, Modigliani's clean and tight. Yet in some ways, these two portraits are not so dissimilar. Both are very abstract. Soutine uses distortion as his abstraction, while Modigliani's abstraction is classic to him: long neck, long face, almond eyes. Both are full face looking forward at us. Both artists use the same colors to represent Soutine, red, yellow, and green. Soutine's background is yellow, and he uses red to define his features, except for the eyes, which are yellow or surrounded by yellow. Modigliani uses red and yellow to split the background and bright red lips and facial tone, and both paint Soutine's clothes in green. Was this intentional on Soutine's part, as he surely saw the Modigliani portrait done the year before? So why do they look so different? Some of the difference is in technique, and much is in how they view the subject. Soutine uses broad strokes that feel loose. He creates texture by leaving the weave of the canvas to show through. There is a reality to his abstraction and distortion, and a feeling that he paints with passion. Yet there is also a sense of alienation or isolation. And for all the distorted strokes, his eyes are staring straight ahead and seeing clearly. Modigliani's texture is from scumbling. While the figure is abstract, it is not distorted. In this painting, the elongated face and neck do not seem unreal. While the eyes are classically dark, there is a white spot in each that brings life. Soutine is almost smiling, or maybe he is smiling. It's a lot of expression for a Modigliani portrait. So which one is the true Soutine? Probably both.
This is beautifully written.
Thank you.
Yeah, really beautiful, very austere, nothing extra. And I think that's wonderful. I noticed that you didn't use the word I, which I like.
Right.
And you didn't tell us when it ended. Okay,
Right.
which
Right.
I like too. You don't need to know when it ends. You just change your voice or slow down or whatever, or be abrupt, and it ends. And I think that your point of view here, the way you compared the two, is excellent.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, really good. Have you been to the Hermitage?
Yes,
And did you see that painting there?
I don't think so.
And is there, in particular, a very good collection there of this world that they inhabit?
At the Hermitage?
Yeah.
Well, the main part of the Hermitage is older paintings, and they have moved the modern post-impressionist to the soldiers' barracks, and it's quite a wonderful collection.
Oh, so you've been there
Of
recently?
course, nothing from the Hermitage travels because they're afraid they'll never get it back. So,
You've been there recently then?
about just before COVID, about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I always wanted to go, but I feel funny about going there now.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't go now.
Yeah, but I really always wanted to go.
You're not invited anyway.
Right.
So I didn't hear that.
I said, you're not invited to the Hermitage anyway.
We actually
How do you know? How do you know?
we actually had a wonderful time because we had one of the curators for a couple of hours. We arranged it, and he was marvelous and took us through, and then
You
talked
know,
a lot about it.
there's a very good movie. I can't remember the name of the director of this movie, but I think it's called Russian Ark. Do you know this film?
No.
All right, this is a film that you should see, actually. It's a film that takes you through the Hermitage and into the next building in one take.
Oh, wow.
In one take, all the way through, and ends in, I think the next building might be called the Winter Garden. And in that building, there's an orchestra playing and a dance is taking place.
Wow.
It's a fantastic film.
It's called what?
It's called, I believe it's called Russian Ark.
Okay.
And it's maybe 2 hours long. It's one continuous take.
Wow.
And I think you would respond to it. Okay, so I have Kristen, who I hope is here. This one. Is Kristen?
I'm here.
Oh, great,
Yep.
great.
I'm here. I just want to say first, I learned so much and love listening to everyone. It's really amazing.
I second that. Really.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. I mean,
wow. It's terrific.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's
Kristen,
amazing.
thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Everyone has such, really great insight into this stuff. It's really education for me. So,
But actually, Kristen is saying this because she views us as the children in the class she teaches. And when the children are doing well, she says to the children, I am learning so much. Everyone is learning so much. You're so smart. You 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, you are so smart. What do you think of that, Kristen? Is that correct?
Okay.
Am I correct?
Yeah. If they're being smart, yeah. Well, anyway, thank you to everyone. So I chose these two paintings, and after I chose them, I've learned that they were both painted in 1919.
Wow.
Modigliani was 35 years old, and Soutine was 26 years old. These two paintings by Modigliani and Soutine, both painted in 1919, are eye-catching, particularly because of the colors. One warm, calm, and inviting, the other bright, bold, and energetic. The color values in the Modigliani self-portrait are closely related, warm hues creating a peaceful image of him with a paintbrush and palette at rest in his hands. For the pastry chef, baker boy, Soutine used an array of bright and bold colors, many of which are surprising to the eye, the oranges, greens, and purples in his face, and the many colors used to make up his, quote, white uniform and the background give this guy an almost clownish feel. I learned later that this was the piece that Barnes saw that inspired him to ask and purchase the whole collection, but I didn't know that till later. Although the subjects of both paintings are of real people, they are both represented almost as fantasy figures. The facial features of both figures are not realistic. They both exude seriousness in the moment, but the faces are contorted, slightly misshapen. There is a slow stillness in Modigliani's long features and flat expression, with eyes that are so black and inexpressive it almost seems as if he is worn out or sleeping on the painting job. In contrast, Soutine's sitting chef with his crooked, pouty face, one oversized ear, blurred eyes and features, is painted layer upon layer in vivid and varied hues and shades, with jumpy lines and curves. And it gives the chef energy and life, even as he sits still in his chair. The use of paint in these surprising combinations make the subject more interesting than he may have been in life. Oh, I skipped a part about Modigliani. Modigliani's face feels carefully formed and shaded, but with great simplicity, as does the rest of this painting. The painting is spare and sparse. Close up, there are still outlines, perhaps pencil lines visible throughout. Did he plan to go back to add more, or was he pleased with it as it is? Side by side, the Modigliani seems understated, flat, peaceful, almost wistful, while the Soutine feels bright with energy, over-embellished, almost garish, as if perhaps the baker might leap off the canvas or melt into himself.
Yeah, well done. Really well done. I think your choice is terrific. They're very interesting together. And I think what you said about everyone's essays or presentations is, I totally agree. So thank you. Thank you. So the next one I have is
Okay.
That's me, Simon?
yes.
Okay, so I kind of had them, whoops.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Rita.
I kind of had them flipped so that I start with Soutine.
Okay.
And Soutine's oil on canvas is 36 by 25 and 5/8. It's a nice size, and it's called La Femme en Rouge, which is the lady in red, which is of course irresistible. Who doesn't want a lady in red standing before them? So I'll start with her. Soutine's brilliant orange-red heat practically steals all the attention, filling the canvas with dramatic motion. Voluminous, silky, flowing, smartly draped, the fabric cloaks a Parisian woman of a certain age. Her hands are expressively gnarled, but gracefully so. She is feeling especially self-assured and elegant tonight. Lips to match the gown, cheeks rouged to impart a youthful glow. Soutine captures her bemused, intelligent smile and rakishly tilted chapeau, an inky blue-black statement hat that more than enhances and balances the vibrancy of both dress and woman. I am imagining her in a cafe in Montparnasse or Montmartre, sitting among the struggling artists, enjoying every moment and perhaps ending the evening with a newly acquired painting. Next, I want to speak about Christina by Modigliani. This painting is 31.5 by 27.125, again, oil on canvas. Modigliani's Christina is a much different painting, done of his mistress shortly before the painter's death. The red of Soutine is now a cooler Parisian blue, a textured background that emphasizes the young woman's natural golden radiance without adornment. She seems all stillness and patience, with an uncomplicated and timeless feminine grace and innocence. Large eyes, delicate mouth, slightly pointed chin. There is sweetness and a hint of melancholy. Then her swan-like neck and sloped shoulders lead the eye downward to her plain blouse. And that one slender, slipped strap of blouse somehow becomes the riveting element of the painting. Until we reach that thoughtfully positioned strap, Christina might be the Mona Lisa. Modigliani brilliantly introduces a detail of understated sensuality, provoking us to study once again Christina's inscrutable gaze.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. The one on the right, the Soutine, the woman has a definite twinkle in her eyes. They're interesting together. Very, very interesting. Yeah, the next one I see is this Jason?
Yes, that's me.
Good, good.
Good. These are two of my favorites. To appreciate both paintings, the Soutine on the left and the Modigliani on the right, we have to understand the relationship between the sitter and the artist. It's especially important here. We know for Modigliani, Jean on the right has been his last muse and lover. He had a child by her. She was pregnant with a second child. She was very young, but she was madly in love with him. So yes, he had tuberculosis, but he drank because he didn't want people to know he had tuberculosis. He wanted them to think he was a drunkard, because if it was known he had tuberculosis, people wouldn't want to associate with him because could be contagious. So there was a loving relationship between them. On Soutine, on the other hand, this woman is named Madeleine Castaigne, who turns out to be a very famous, internationally recognized decorator and antique dealer. And she lived into her 90s. There's books written about her. But how we got to know her, she was his patron from the late 1920s to the 1930s. She and her husband was an art critic, owned 43 Soutines. According to her, he was one of the best artists in the world. And at their estate in Luz, she invited him. In fact, he had a room at the estate in Luz because they just loved him so much. So in fact, after Barnes bought the 60 paintings, the prices of Soutine jumped up. And they were among the few who were wealthy enough to afford the higher prices. So bearing in mind those backgrounds, particularly with Soutine, I haven't used this word, the description, at any painting before, nor have I seen it. But this painting, to me, is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because there's two different people in this painting. On one hand, again, knowing her sitter is, she looks wealthy. She has this fabulous fur coat. There's something about her hair and her presence that's sort of queen-like, that she's sophisticated. It's a very strong presence. On the other hand, just the opposite. She look at the distortion on her face. Their eyes look timid. In the color, she looks like she's vulnerable. Look at the movement of her hands, like she's not comfortable. What is she doing sitting there? So that's in quite contrast to the other part of her. And look at the color. Talking about him being a color person more than an artist. If you notice, there's dapples of paint everywhere. Look at her hands. Look at her legs. The paint just thrown in for no certain reason. This is not a typical portrait of a live person. And look at the background. There's layers of paint you can see in the background. There's two different layers, the sort of a light blue and a dark blue. This, by the way, this is the painting in the mat, and I just would love to see it. So we have this quite contrast there between the two of them in their hands. But the other thing that stands out about her is that we talked last week, Simon, about, his mental state. In a sense, he's putting his distorted view of her, which is disconnected with the person she really is. Now, one wonders what she thought of this, because many people would have looked at it, some would have thrown it in the trash because of the distortion, but not her, because she just loved him so much that I haven't found any record of what she thought, but obviously she loved it, and it's one of his most famous paintings. So, so I think overall, this is typical in some ways of him, given the dichotomy here. In contrast to the Modigliani, somebody earlier had another portrait of Jean. What stands out about this one, and he did a lot of portraits of her, is first of all, because of his relationship with her, there are no nudes of her. And this painting, more than any others I've seen, the eyes, that we talked about the eyes here. These eyes shine more than any I've seen because they're closer to the viewer, and they have love in them. They sparkle, but they have love. You can make them, they stand out so much. She loves the viewer. And look at the face. Look, I'm sorry, Simon, I didn't hear what you said.
Well said.
Yeah. So, but her face is a little elongated, but not like the others. And what's even more important, the closest here is shown. You notice, unlike the others, which are sort of straight faces, the ear is showing. So she's showing a little more, but the ear stands out, so it's more for her. If you look at all the other paintings, the eyes are almost dead. They're still. They may show a little bit, but this one is so close, it's vibrant, but stands out with a simple background on the wall and the dark colors of her top, so it emphasizes the soft, sensitive nature of her face. It's almost like a shy appearance that she's giving here. And look at her hair. He really emphasized her long hair. I saw a photograph of her. Doesn't exactly look like the painting, but she had this fabulous dark hair. I mean, I was all black and white. But if you notice closely what he does to accentuate the hair, it shows his feeling for her. You can see the brushstrokes on her hair. So you follow down the side, so these intimate brushstrokes, which again is more like, who she really is, and you get the semblance of that face and the relationship between the two of them. So I think that between the two, we have the personal, and then we have the dichotomy on the other side. So it's interesting to think how close these two were in some ways, yet they had a different view of the world.
Well done. For the purposes of this class and just in general, I like hard looking or slow looking or intense looking. And what you've just done is quite a good example of that. And really keep it up. It's terrific.
Thank you.
The next one that I have is this, who did this? Kathy? Who did this? Who presented these two?
Me, Kathy.
Kathy. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Okay, the first one is Chaim Soutine's Chicken Hanging Against a Brick Wall, 1925, oil on canvas, 25.6 by 18.3. The first thing that strikes me about this painting is the face of the bird. Though it's dead, it looks like it's screaming. There's a terrible feeling of desperation. Soutine did not replicate the works of the great masters he observed and studied at the Louvre who painted similar subject matter. He took his impressions on a much more personal journey. He made us feel agony, terror, and fear as if it were a human experience. His use of strong colors adds to the drama. Then what I see here is two birds, one inside of the other. First, there's the big black bird, whose feathers seem to be embracing a smaller yellow bird. The bigger bird is itself black, but also surrounded by black, perhaps representing death. And the broken red brick brick wall, a layer beneath, and to the left forces the eye to look at it. He uses red a lot in all of his work. What is it suggesting here? Blood. Though we don't think of red brick as cold, could be stone cold or dead. To the bottom left, there seems to be the profile of a man that looks like the artist. Is he symbolic of the blood pouring from the recently killed bird? The more I look, the more I see, and the more I think I see. With all of what hits you as obvious at first, you continue to look at this spectacle of raw, fresh kill, only to discover a beauty you weren't seeing at first. It's the colors and the brushstrokes he so brilliantly perfected in his expressionistic style. Suddenly there are different shades of yellow and blue in the claws of the birds, or what I see in the bird within the bird. One is dead and screaming, while the other has wings and ready to fly and is facing up as is waiting to be fed, not killed. There's death and life together, separated by color and mood. The older or bigger bird is shrouded in black, suggesting death, while the smaller one is in bright yellow, suggesting sunlight and joy. Yes, Soutine's work was most definitely influenced by his very troubled life, and he expressed his pain through a definite exposition of images that demand a response. You can be disgusted and walk away, or you can stay and examine what's in front of you to eventually realize you've discovered something new and meaningful and beautiful in a way you hadn't seen before. That's what happened to me.
Could I just break in just for a
Yeah.
second? I know you're going to continue, but
Yeah.
I can't help thinking of the word schism in what
Schism?
schism in your presentation. Keep going.
Okay. This is what happened to me. Through reading about his life and looking through many of his works, I chose this particular painting because it taught me something I hadn't expected. I cringed at first at the apparent violence, but I came to know more about him, and by staying with this one painting long enough, I began to see a beauty in it that wasn't there at first. This was a breakthrough for me. I think having the dead bird in front of him fed his need for authenticity and allowed him to get inside of the subject he was painting. Not in a literal way, but like the difference between reading about making love and actually making love. Seeing a dead bird right after it's been killed has to affect you. If you're human and you care about any life form, you have to feel something. And what Soutine saw, he painted. And we can experience his humanity and his pain through this work. Okay, the other one is Modigliani. This is Madame Hanka Zabowska, 1917, oil on canvas, 21 5/8 by 15 1/8. So many portraits to choose from, but after some reading about his life, I chose Madame Hanka, or Anna, because of what she meant to Modigliani's life. She and her husband Leopold, who was an art dealer and represented him, were two of the few people who supported Modigliani during his short-lived life. His alcohol and drug addiction did not contribute to their relationship or his failing health, which began with typhoid fever and tuberculosis, which eventually killed him at the age of 35. Hashish and absinthe were considered the genesis of his style. Wherever it came from, he's admired as one of the greatest figurative painters of the early 20th century. I was drawn to his paintings like everyone else, the gracefulness and beauty of his subjects, the colors he uses, and the very uniqueness of it. The painting of Hanka, or Anna, is probably a perfect example of his style and technique. The long face and the neck offer a female softness to a very gentle kindness of her face. I'm most likely imposing that on the painting, but that's what I chose to see. The whole painting depicts a serene and peaceful woman with a calm and accepting attitude. Though she is often described as distant, I don't see that. People often impose incorrect impressions based on their own insecurities or judgments. I see more of a sadness in her eyes, looking directly at the artist as he paints her. I think she may have had conflicting feelings in that she disapproved of his bohemian lifestyle, while at the same time believing strongly in his talent and was willing to back him financially and emotionally. She was one of his favorite and most frequent subjects. I love the composition. giving us Anna in the main focus of the painting while allowing there's more to the space around her, perhaps a sitting room in her home or even in his studio, which was also in her home. I should probably say something about the red dress, the trim around it, her short cropped hair and the details of her face, as well as the muted colored background. I will say I noticed all of that, but I have no particular insight to add to it at this time. As with Soutine, Modigliani had a loving and supportive mother who believed in his talent. He did not, however, have a benefactor like Barnes, and sold very little during his lifetime and died poor. Today, this painting went for over $7 million at Sotheby's.
Terrific, Kathy. Terrific. If time permits, I have a little present for you later. So the next one is Kathleen.
Well, when I first saw the landscape that you chose of Soutine's, there were a lot of like straight lines in it, and I immediately thought of Auerbach. But then, first of all, the reason I didn't choose Modigliani is that I don't have any visceral reaction to it. So I wanted something a bit more dramatic that I could, just sort of get into the feeling of it. So, but then they were almost too similar. So I decided, instead of doing the landscapes, to do the people. And the way I think about them is that Auerbach is kind of the logical conclusion of what Soutine has started. Although I'm not sure that well, let me just say that Auerbach was born in 1931, and
so I don't know if you're getting to this, but what Kathleen is talking about, the artist on the left is an English artist named Frank Auerbach. Okay, go ahead.
They were both sort of emigres, I guess, from where they were raised. Auerbach, excuse me, was during World War II. They called them Kindertransport, and he was sent by his parents to save him from the Nazis at the age of 7, I believe. Excuse me. So he escaped in one way, and Soutine also escaped from his small town that was rural, and there wasn't much culture going on there. So Auerbach, though he was German, ended up in England, and Soutine, though he was from Belarus, ended up in France. So they were detached from their homes. Auerbach, well, first of all, I didn't actually get to write this coherently, so it's going to be a lot of little notes. Let's see. Auerbach's painting is called Head of Catherine Lampert. Was painted in 1985, and it's 30 by, this doesn't look like right. Maybe I mistyped it. Maybe it's 20 by 22. I think that's more likely. So as I said, he was sent away from Germany during World War II. And then his parents stayed in Germany, and they died in the death camps. And I think that affects his sort of bleak and almost angry paintings. And it contrasted with Soutine. Everybody seems to see depression in his people, and I my reaction, well, especially compared to our box, but my reaction, especially to this painting, the pastry chef, is that he just looks tired and sort of impassive. And if you look at his hands, they're red, like he's been working hard. And he did a few different paintings of people associated with hotels and restaurants, and they all have a similar feeling of sort of resignation. I don't feel depression that much from them. They both had some early training, although Auerbach had more formal and probably better training. He started younger, I think, than Soutine. See, oh, what I like about Auerbach is that I was able to find some quotes that he made about his own work. And he's like Soutine in this, that they're both trying to get to the essence of the person. So he's looking for the essence of the model and not their features. And you don't, yeah, so both of them do that. So, but you feel a relationship between Soutine and his people. Whereas for Auerbach, I have more of a relationship with the paint, although they both, in both of them, the paint is, it's one of the subjects, but in Auerbach, I think it's more the paint and the abstraction. In Soutine, you feel like his people are people rather than an expression of an emotion. Although he also is trying to get to the essence and the spirit of the people he paints.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Maybe you could just sort of summarize or just go a little bit further, because there's one more to go. There's one more person to go.
Oh, there is? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. A couple of things that Auerbach says is that he's trying to get to paint something that is locked in the person. And he feels like he wants a painting to look like it's trying to escape. I can stop there. That's all right.
That's good. That's good. You should know that there's a very beautiful painting by Freud of Frank Auerbach. You should look it up.
Yeah,
It's
I knew.
very good painting.
Yeah, they were in the same sort of milieu.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the last person to go is Victoria.
Again.
Victoria?
Yeah, no. Victoria again. So Simon has let me present two more paintings because I kept sending him paintings because I couldn't decide.
Well, also another part of this also is that Victoria was away to start with, and she didn't present to begin with. So
so this is my makeup session?
yes, but not known to you. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Anyway, so I quickly wrote up a thing on these two Soutine portraits that I really like. So this is
very nice pairing.
This is what I have to say. Such crazy portraits. I'm sure these models were not happy with their pictures, but the portraits are so full of energy. The vivid reds draw the viewer in, as do the bold, simplified shapes. I haven't seen any Soutine paintings in person, but the paint seems to be thickly applied, so I'm sure that gives the work additional texture and three-dimensionality. They are probably paintings you'd love to touch. The first one, Woman in Red. This is my favorite of all the Soutine paintings I've seen. The woman's features are clownish, but she also has such sparkle. The image has lovely symmetry, and yet nothing in it is symmetrical. The hat is lopsided, her eyes are different sizes, her nose and smile are crooked, her left shoulder droops. The unevenness gives the painting so much movement and draws your eyes around the whole image rather than letting you rest in one place only. It exudes exuberance. The second painting, Woman in Pink, this painting has more symmetry than Woman in Red, but movement is captured in the curving lines that don't have corners where your eye can rest. Again, you are swirled around the entire image, almost against your will. And I wonder, who is this woman talking with? She is so clearly engrossed in conversation and not just posing. It's more than just a painting. You feel you are face to face with a real person.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to remind you that next week is the first presentation of the two Georges, and then we're going to take a break for Easter. We're going to take a break for Easter and Passover, and then we have two classes left. So I thought I would end the evening with this quote, and this quote is for Kathy, but it's for all of you. So this is Chaim Soutine. It's not very long. Once I saw the village butcher slice the neck of a bird and drain the blood out of it. I wanted to cry out, but his joyful expression caught the sound in my throat. This cry, I always feel it there. When, as a child, I drew a crude portrait of my professor, I tried to rid myself of this cry, but in vain. When I painted the beef carcass, it was still this cry that I wanted to liberate. I have still not succeeded.
Yes, I read that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
thought there
Simon.
were
Thank you,
three
one and all.
Georges you were going to do.
What?
I thought there were three Georges you were going to do.
I'm sorry,
Three
say it
Georges.
again. Say it again.
You said
I
that.
thought there were three Georges you were going to do.
I made it four. I made it four. I made it four because there was a problem with the last two classes, and I thought the simplest thing would be to bring in one more George. So I brought in George Surratt.
Oh yeah, okay, all right. I see
who
my
is-
notes.
Who is pretty good.
That's
So
correct. Okay.
There's two next week. Listen, there's two next
Two
week.
next week are
There's two in 3 weeks, and then you're going to write on two of them. Okay?
Okay.
okay.
Because that will give you a chance to participate. Okay?
Good.
Right.
Great.
Anyway, some of you write to me, you like writing, so you write to me. And if you feel like doing that, please do that. But very high quality responses, really high quality, and most enjoyable. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night,
Simon.
everybody.
Thank you, Simon, and thank everybody, really.
Okay.
See you next week.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
See
See
you
you
next
next
week.
week.
Bye.
Next week.
Bye.
Bye.